Welcome to Action Hour. I'm your host, Lindsey Baker, and today we have breaking news.
Right now, wild horse herds across the Southwest, from Arizona to Wyoming, are being aggressively rounded up by the Bureau of Land Management and other agencies. Officials claim it's for population control, but ecologists and advocates say otherwise. The real drivers? Pressure from cattle ranchers and land use politics. Today, I'm joined by ecologist Craig Downer and longtime advocates Robert Hutchinson and Heather Heller to unpack what's really happening. We also have Christina Koo, who is an attorney here in Los Angeles. The public must take notice. These herds are being decimated. The question is, will we let them disappear?
I actually found out tonight from Heather and Craig that there are two herds that are very much eminently in danger of being rounded up as we speak, and that's why we came together. We want to get this out there. So you said you have an idea of in each group how many horses there are. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah. In the Heber, there's only a couple hundred, maybe up to 300 left, and they want to get them down to like 70 horses. And actually, they should have a couple million acres there in the Apache Sitgraves National Forest. It's two combined forests, has sort of a cabal going where they have eliminated so many of the horses there. So on the Salt River, that's on actually sort of the same herd because they used to interbreed when there were more horses. And that, there's only about 30,000 acres that they're allowing to be recognized, and there's only about 300 left there. And the suit by the different organizations are trying to whittle them down, wants to reduce them either to nothing or to just 50 horses. And they're one of the greatest attractions there in all the United States. There are many thousands of people and even millions visit that area. And one of the main reasons they go there is to see these beautiful wild horses.
Robert, tell us a little bit about how your background, how you got involved with the horses.
I came here on the anniversary of the turned out to be the murders of Scott and Wilson, three ranchers, young boys, who were raising horses here in Heber, Overgard, Arizona. And I didn't know what I was driving into out there. So anyhow, I went back to Nevada, and I could not escape the fact that they were doing a roundup at that time in 1988 right here in the forest, and they were capturing horses illegally and taking them to on a one-way ride. They drew up an agreement with a rancher, and the rancher went out there and collected 187 horses illegally, and with the help of the Forest Service, BLM, and Department of the Interior, all the way to the president. Okay, and they were doing this illegally, and they got away with it, and they were never reprimanded for it or anything. The Wild Horse and Burro Act, of course, as you well know, is December 17th, 1971, and signed by President Nixon with a unanimous House decision. And so it's been on the books since that time, and the horses have had enemies before and after that event, and they're just ignoring the fines, the prison time, everything about it.
Heather, I know that you've been to visit a lot of the different herds you mentioned to me earlier when we spoke. What do you think these numbers? I want to stay on the numbers for a minute. Bringing a herd down to 400 and then reducing it more. What kind of effect? I mean, how far are they pushing this envelope here? Would you say?
Well, they're pushing it quite far, and the problem is genetic diversity. So as you reduce horses from a herd, whether it's 1,000 horses or 400 horses, and you remove 50% of those horses, you've reduced the genetic diversity in the herd. And that is the biggest problem. There are studies out there that say a certain number of horses are needed for genetic diversity, Craig knows that number. To cover the Salt Wells Creek herd, for example, which I am visiting right now in Rock Springs, Wyoming, the Bureau of Land Management claims that there are 1,200 horses in the herd, but in speaking to a couple of local photographers, they've only documented less than 700. And yet the Bureau of Land Management wants to go out and reduce that herd to around 350. So that gives you less stallions and less mares who are breeding and less genetic diversity.
Right. Let's bring Craig in on that quickly.
There's been independent studies that weren't beholden to contracts from the BLM that say that you need 2,500 for a genetically long-term viable population in the wild, and that if you have a species or subspecies or population that is on the verge of extinction and tightly managed, kind of winking out, then you need at least 500. But what they commonly say are saying, that we only need about 200 wild horses, and I consider that to be short of the mark that would allow a population. Let me remind you that the Endangered Species Act covers not only entire species, but also subspecies and unique populations. So the wild horse and burro populations that they're setting up at these very low levels, they're actually making them endangered because their genetic resilience is too low, and they could succumb to diseases. Or
you're saying that they will not only destroy the herds, they will destroy the entire ecosystem.
Oh, yes, I believe, because they're a returned keystone species. Both the horse and burros were here for millions of years, so they contribute many positive. They build soils, they seed a diversity of plants, they open thickets, they prevent catastrophic wildfires. They do all kinds of good things, and that's true of all those in their order.
The horse has the only stomach on the landscape to replenish the landscape by way of its droppings and stuff like that, and they deliver them in great areas. They'll make 20-mile circles between food and water, and so they distribute these seeds within their piles of feces all around the forest and enhance everything that he just described.
They build the soil to a greater degree than the ruminants, and they seed a lot more intact seeds from a greater variety of plants, which go on to spring up. They cause a greater biodiversity of species, of plants and consequently of animals too, and they build rich soils. And that's very important here in the desert. They do not as thoroughly digest what they ingest. Consequently, they feed the ecosystem with material that's just partially initially digested, and that allows a myriad other species then to further digest it, including microorganisms in the soil.
I would like to add, because you were asking about populations of wild horses, that when the Wild and Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act of 1971 was passed, we had at least 329 wild horse and burro herds across the western states. Today, we're down to 165, and that will soon be 163. Those herds were on over 53 million acres. We're down to 26 million acres. And there are a number of herds, at least 50 of them out of that, where the approved number of horses or burros within those herds is less than 50. And there are also a number of herds where the Bureau of Land Management only allows between 10 to 20 burros or wild horses within a herd area. So their master plan is extinction of the wild horses and burros, and these are the numbers of ways that they plan to get that done.
Christina, how much of this, as a person that's pretty well informed about animal rights, How much of this is like shocking? How do you feel about hearing this information?
There's nowhere in media that we hear about this, not in stories on the news, not in magazines, not on billboards. People don't talk about it. So it is quite shocking. And I think when you tell people this, and I have spoken to regular folks, not even, animal rights folks or dog lovers, cat lovers, they don't believe it and they don't understand it. And it is a complicated issue. And so I think the more ways that we can get this out there, the better it is for this movement.
The birth control methods, some say none, some say one particular kind, some say another. I would like to just get a quick overview from the three of you on what's your take on that. So I'll start with Heather.
I wish that fertility control did not need to be used on our wild horse and burro herds. That would be my wish. Take the Saltwells Creek herd, for example, who I'm visiting presently. Nearly every mare in that herd has a foal every year. And so the population of the herd is increasing to the point where the Bureau of Land Management feels that it is necessary to go up and round up this herd with helicopters every 2 to 3 years. You have some herds that are only have available maybe 20,000 acres to them because they're fenced in. Many of the herds live on islands. The exception would be a lot in Nevada, where there's a lot of the herds are not actually fenced in. And I know Craig and I, we respect each other's opinions on this, but we will differ a little bit. I believe that the only fertility control that should be used is native PZP. It is very similar to a birth control that a human might use, a woman. It would, if they take them off of that, it would allow them to then have a healthy foal. And it's administered to them once a year. And just in my personal opinion, I feel that some of these smaller herds where they're fenced in and they're not able to grow, or there's not enough forage for, say, 1,000 horses on 100,000 acres, that native fertility control through PZP would be one of the tools in the toolbox used to help keep our herds on our public lands.
So Craig, would you answer that next? What's your take on birth control?
What's going to happen in the long term with these horses? Because in fact, when you're altering their intimate parts, you are domesticating them. And I remember that through a proper reserve design, these animals, which are what you call climax species, are capable of self-limitation once they fill their ecological niche. And they have many ways of doing this, including suspended fertilization. They're really amazing. These animals have been here for millions of years. So when they're back to their wild type and all their instincts are revived, so I think the trick is to have a proper reserve design, a team that actually appreciates horses in nature and who would, in an educated manner, identify all their survival requirements in the long term. So it would be water, shelter, forage, seasonal requirements. Also, there's often specific habitats for reproduction and for seasonal migrations. And all those things would be taken into consideration, and also a decent numbers. I would say, at least 500 reproducing intact individuals to be given a chance to survive in the long term. The other aspect is mature social units. When you allow the mature bands to form, they limit the population. Also, when they fill the niche within a more or less contained area, for example, natural barriers, or where necessary, semi-permeable barriers, they would self-stabilize. But because these the people manage them are not fair-minded toward these animals, they don't want to adopt this horse and burro respectful and nature respectful approach. But I believe it's the right one. And I have studied in depth about PZP. It's certainly better than Gonacon, which is terrible. But there are some serious problems with PZP as well over time.
Okay, let me bring Robert in now on that one, if you would. Robert, thank you for being so patient there.
When it comes to the PZP, I know for a fact, and I'm not just exaggerating or just talking through my hat here. This is something that is designed for self-extermination. It's sick and twisted. It's a sick and twisted mindset, and it's very, very evil. And it's something that they're getting away with. All offices of public trust are involved in it. I've had the FBI right here in my living room having discussions here in Heber Overgaard. They will not do nothing. I simply am asking for a cease and desist order against this conduct, and that's all I want is a cease and desist, and do a study equivalent to what Mr. Downer has done and expose these truths as he did in the Wild Horse Conspiracy book.
Right.
And it spells it all out, and the study that he did afterwards that I helped him with.
And he was so nice as to make some duplicates of my study, which was peer reviewed. So I bring a lot of these points out. But one of the things that most bothers me about PZP, is that zoologists have recognized that, who have done objective studies, that it over the generations, it weakens their immune systems. So you're actually setting them up, and that's because the mares that have the weaker immune systems, those are the ones that PZP does not work so well on. So they end up having more offspring. So over the generations, you're creating a population that is immune compromised, and that's very serious, especially when you have a small number that you're confined to. They're not as resilient to the ups and downs of nature and global warming and diseases and things like that.
Okay, thank you. I want to move on to another question. I want to talk about the roundups. Just yesterday, I was on an emergency live to rescue from the slaughter pipeline, which we all know exists, two beautiful young mustangs, and luckily they were saved, but so many were not. I want to talk about the horrific roundups. Have any of you experienced a roundup?
Yeah, so I did attend the 2022 roundup of the Cedar Mountain wild horses in Utah, and I photographed it and videographed it. The helicopters will sometimes travel many, many, many miles to find the horses, and then they'll chase them many, many miles into the jute trap, where the horses are led in by what's called a Judas horse, which is a domesticated horse that the ranchers will let go to encourage the wild horses to enter the trap. And once they've done that, the stallions and mares are then separated from each other and loaded onto trailers and shipped to holding facilities. And I've also been to those holding facilities, and I have witnessed many mares and stallions and foals whinnying for each other, trying to find each other and get back to each other. During the roundups, many injuries happen when fencing is not marked off correctly by the Bureau of Land Management, or perhaps they're chased through a ravine. Many of the stallions try to get out of the corral trap once they enter it, so they will try to jump over these very high corral panels, often breaking their legs or their necks. And many, many times the Bureau of Land Management will leave a foal out on the range by itself who is unable to keep up with its own family. So the entire process of a helicopter roundup is absolutely abhorrent, and it's a very cruel process.
Thank you. Craig, we're going to have you comment next on that.
Yeah, I've observed many of these roundups, and they're really horrific, traumatic experiences. I've seen a beautiful white mare who was involved in a ruckus, because often they go berserk once they're trapped, and they kick and bite each other. And she broke her upper front leg and just was thrashing around, and the buckaroo had to come and shoot her in the head. That was terrible. And even I was assigned a BLM law agent, a lady, and she broke into tears, actually. It took a lot to, I've observed many terrible things. I've observed a stallion going berserk within the trailer when he was loaded. He just lost it. And the wranglers had to jump out, but it was either, hey, I'm going to be free or I'm going to die trying to be free. And then the one on the cover of my book, Freedom, he's the one that was rounded up there in the Black Rock East. He had to abandon his band of 12, including the horse one of the horse I adopted, Princess Diane, was his lead mare. But he had to leap over a 6-7 foot metal corral. Third try he made it, then he went out, and then he took one last look. So it was just really very electrifying, and I described that in my book. But no, it's a horrific process, and we should let them fill their niche and self-stabilize. And I don't mind taking a few in a peaceful way for people who have good homes or can place them. But to do this wholesale reductions, that's a torture of the animals. And it's totally contrary to the true spirit and intent of the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act.
But long before I met Craig Downer in 2011, he was at a roundup there in Pioche, Nevada, in Wilson Creek. And it was January 5th. It was 20 below zero. And he was there and witnessed that event. In 2021, one of these geldings that came off of there, he was 7 years on death row because if he's not adopted within 3 attempts, then he is killed. Anyhow,
many died of pneumonia because it was so cold and they were driving them that they developed pneumonia and died subsequently. And they were trying to minimize that fact, but there was like almost 20 that died in that roundup.
We know that the horses are winding up on the slaughter pipeline. Does anyone have any personal experience or evidence that they can share about that?
Well, James Antiquaid Kleinert did a story, and Craig would remember the name of that. Wild Horses and Renegades.com. That's what.
Yeah, Mustangs and Renegades.
Renegades.com, and he did that study, and it is a documentary, an award-winning documentary now on the slaughter of horses that went into Mexico, and it was all done by hidden camera and stuff. And you need to see that to see the entire picture of what you're concerned with here.
We actually played a video of it yesterday. I was going to give you a chance to comment.
Yeah, so just hearing the words from all you folks, it's even more horrendous than the still photos that I see. I mean, I was only imagining how those horses would feel being chased by these helicopters. I've got, many of those versions, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's got to be bad, the loud noise, but to hear all the details of all the injuries and the trauma, it's just even worse than what I had imagined. So I'm just, deeply affected by that, and I think anybody would. I think people love horses. And if they hear about this, I think even if they're not a quote unquote, animal advocate or an activist in any form, to hear that, I tell you, 100% people would say, don't do that to these innocent wild horses.
Right.
So
I think the next thing I want to talk about is what we can do. What can the public do? Are there any sites we can send people to, Congress people?
I have written certified letters to 57 dignitaries over a period of time of 37 years, and I have not gotten a phone call back or a letter or anything. And I'm talking from Trump on down. I'm talking all of his children I have sent independent letters to the First Lady, every congressperson, senator, governors for 37 years. And I honestly don't know what to tell you.
I would like to jump in for a moment if I can. I co-hosted the Save Our Wild Horses DC conference in Washington, DC for 2 years in a row.
Nice.
In our second year, we invited Representative David Schweikert of Arizona, Congressman, Republican, to our conference. And he literally was flying from Arizona to Washington, DC. He got off the plane and came to the hotel where we were holding the conference. And I will tell you that what sticks with me that he said the most, because one of my questions to him was, what can we as advocates do to help keep wild horses on our public lands? And what he said was, I am just one person, and I have 434 colleagues in the House of Representatives. And it is your job as advocates to not only send letters, to send postcards, to send emails, but to also call your representative and request an in-person meeting where you can show that representative videos of the horses being rounded up, photographs of the injuries that happen to the horses during the roundups, photographs of the horses when they're wild and free on our public lands and how they're sentient beings and how they're very much tight family bonds with each other. And he said it is our job to do that. So that is what I have been concentrating on for the past 5 years, is giving advocates the basic tools that they need and the scripts that they can use to contact their representatives and their senators. And in my opinion, that is the number one thing you can do. But more than the phone calls and the emails, than the texts and the emails, you need to make a phone call and schedule an appointment, an in-person appointment with that representative, senator, and or their staff so that you can show them in person what is actually happening.
Thank you so much for that. Craig, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, that's really important. And I also write articles and appear on programs such as yours, and that's also effective. But I do believe that you should give input and participate in the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service public scoping and input windows for various plans on all these herds, and become interested in at least one herd. But
there's a lot of work to start this campaign and maintain it and get everybody involved and update them on what's happening and all the various meetings and public comments, dates and times, and and then rallying them to get motivated to join. I mean, we've done it for smaller projects, but even those take so much energy. And it definitely needs some, leadership to organize this. And maybe that's something to strategize on. Who are some of the key folks who can do that locally and by each state and so forth?
Yeah, I wanted just to add that when you give official comments, that gives you legal standing to sue. And often these various groups, wild horse and burro groups or humane societies, whatever, and will or like Western Watersheds Project or different ones, they will actually represent you. And I've been represented by Friends of Animals and other groups where I've been the main plaintiff or one of the main plaintiffs on major roundup. And sometimes we've won. Greatly helps if you're like Heather is going around becoming personally familiar with the bands. That gives you great standing because you know the herds and their habitat, so you can say, yes, this is a part of my quality of life, or it's a vital part of my profession.
Well, that's really good to know that people, the average person, can just go ahead and start doing that, or as much to what degree they can. I just want to also add in, it's also really, really great. I'm on TikTok. Unchained TV is on TikTok. And we have all our social media outlets. And for the people that do see this broadcast, please share this out. Share this broadcast out, or you can even take a clip from it, share out an important part that touches your heart that you think is going to help get people to know what's going on. Because that's one of the questions I'm going to be wrapping up with you guys. If there's one myth about wild horses you wish people knew was untrue, what would that be? I'll start with Craig.
Or I would say that they're non-native and that they are destructive exotics, that is a real lie. And that ignores so many years of fossil hunters and DNA paleontologists who have examined it, and also ecologists such as myself who know that that's false, that they actually enhance ecosystems and are mutualistic symbionts to myriad species of plants and animals. So that would be the one that I would target for squashing.
Okay, Robert, you want to take that question, and then anything we left out?
If you go on Marketplace, you can find my book, Murders on the Mogollon, and look at the front cover. And if you want one, call me up.
Definitely, we'll put up the information for that, and we'll put up the cover of the book. Heather?
I 100% agree with Craig. I mean, there's the falsity out there that equines are not native to North America, when in fact they are. Equines have been here for thousands of years, and whether they are reintroduced species or not is irrelevant. And I will tell you that these two species that are not native to North America, that are the number one reason that our wild horses are being removed and exterminated from our public lands, are cattle and sheep. Cattle and sheep come from Europe. They are not at all native to North America, and they are the number one cause of range degradation on our public lands.
Yeah. Well spoken. That's for sure.
Christina, did you want to add anything?
I do, as not an expert on this area, but just general animal welfare and advocacy. I think the myth is that for most people, they think all these departments and entities are doing their job. Let's trust them. BLM or Fish and Wildlife or Fish and Gaming, all these government entities. Forestry, they must know what they're doing. And I feel it's a myth. They don't. And most of the time I hear atrocities happening under their management. So I think people need to understand that you cannot rely on them, and individuals need to organize and take action.
Excellent.
If I could just add one thing to that quickly, Lindsay. I just remember that one other thing that Representative David Schweikert said when he spoke to us at our conference in Washington, D.C., was that he feels that his colleagues know nothing about wild horses. They don't know they're out there. They don't know what's actually happening to them. And it is our job as advocates and as part of the American public to inform our U.S. representative and our 2 U.S. senators of what is actually happening. Because 99.9% of them have never even stepped foot on our public lands. So it's up to us to make those changes happen.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Craig, you wanted to mention that.
It was going to say we have demonstrations here in Nevada. We have them every Wednesday, and we just celebrated the 90th birthday of the organizer, who's been going on for a dozen years or so. She turned, Julie Lee from Virginia City, and that's having a real effect because hundreds or even thousands of people see us every Wednesday, and we have all kinds of placards, and sometimes we get interviews. And we bring things to attention. So it's really good that this is happening. We always have someone out there.
I have people staying here at the hotel with me, and I'm taking them out to see wild horses for the very first time. And that's something I'm always willing to do. And then on the website, I have directions to different wild herds. I even met a videographer and her husband who are staying here at the hotel, who are putting together a small documentary. But anybody's welcome to contact me. If I'm able to go out and take them out, I'm more than happy to, but I'm also more than happy to give them directions on how to do so. Because as Craig and I have both said, it is important that out of 165 herds, there's really only a few herds that are very well known. The Onakee Wild Horses, McCulloch Peak, Sandwash Basin, Salt Wells Creek. That leaves 161 other herds that many people are not familiar with and have never heard of. So if we can get more people out to these smaller unknown herds, perhaps start naming the horses on their own and sharing their family stories, the horse family stories with people, that's just another way to help get advocates involved, because horses are spread Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado. New Mexico. So there's lots and lots of places for people to go see these wild horses and burros and to just get involved with them. That public lands belong to all Americans. I've personally just moved from Hawaii to Colorado, but I still contacted my Hawaii representative and both of my senators, and I explained to them that while we have no public lands in Hawaii, or while there may be no public lands on the East Coast, every single American, every single taxpayer in this country is funding those wild horse roundups. And every single representative in Congress, no matter which state they come from, are responsible for giving the budget to the Bureau of Land Management each and every year. So I know there are some smaller conferences being held out west, but it really is the entire country as a whole that needs to get involved, because when these bills are passed, it's done by senators and representatives who live in all 50 states.
Okay, so for California, as far as the campaign here, we'll call about the public lands and the wild horses here in California, and we'll research more about that to help get people to get involved.
I want to thank everyone that came on tonight. I feel really much more enlightened about the wild horses. I feel hopeful that there are some things that we can do as individuals, and if you check the links below, you're going to see actionable items that you can take. Please remember that your voice counts, and the more they hear from us, the more these people are going to know that we are holding them accountable to do what they're supposed to do, which is protect the